Thank you for joining us. I am holding in my hand a roll of duct tape and a banana. Let me ask you a question. What do you think this banana is worth? And as you think about that, let's independently value this roll of duct tape. What do you believe this roll of duct tape is worth? In fact, let's just take a small piece of it. Let's call it 12 inches. What do you think 12 inches of duct tape might be worth? Now, again, if you're just joining us, we're moving towards some unique insights regarding perceived value. But to do that, we need to ask ourselves a question. I would like to combine the banana and the duct tape and ask you again, what do you think the two of these combined might be worth? Now, if you've seen the preview for this, I held up these two items before, and then I did something else. I taped the banana to my whiteboard. In this particular form, what do you think the overall value is here? Let's do a little math. I can buy a banana single at a gas station, which is much more expensive than a grocery store, for something under $1. Let's call it 0.75. I actually bought a roll of duct tape about a week ago, and I paid $4 for it. I have a small section, less than 12 inches, but let's call it 12. I don't even know how to isolate the value of that, but I'm going to call it 0.02. Now I'm going to add the two together because we have them together here, and let's see, our total value becomes 0.77 or 77 cents. Now this is something we can call actual value. However, actual value and perceived value are not the same, and this is critical for what we're going to learn together today. A couple of quick disclaimers. Number one, this is the first broadcast from our new studio. We still have weeks of hard work to do to get it up to speed, so if we have any technical difficulties today, please bear with us. Number two, I am losing my voice. I've been doing a lot of speaking, and so if I struggle a bit with that, please forgive me. All that being said, let's go back to the illustration and ask ourselves, what is the difference between actual value and perceived value, and how does a banana and a roll of duct tape somehow communicate that insight? If you're wondering, you may want to read an article. You can Google it. This is from Newsweek. I'm holding it up right now. We've printed it so that I could discuss the unique value of a banana and a piece of duct tape. Indeed, you may find this hard to believe, but the moment we take this banana and duct tape off my whiteboard and we put it on the wall of an art museum, its value changes. If you've seen the recent headlines, you may know that value. If you have not, you might want to take a guess as to what that value might be. But while you're guessing, I'm going to write it on the board. Indeed, we know the value to be perceived as 120,000 US dollars. Now, if that seems absurd, that's because it is. And in fact, it was purchased, this banana and duct tape, as a remarkable piece of art by a very wealthy family. And indeed, it's created a stir all over the art world. A famous artist, Maurizio Cattelan, came out of retirement to do this remarkable piece of art. And somehow, he knows more than the rest of us because he was successful in selling it for $120,000, and people are asking for more editions and trying to purchase more. What is going on here? Well, beneath all of the hype is a deep, important truth that can help you unlock the power in your offers, that can help you unlock the power in your messaging. You see, there's a distinct difference between actual value and perceived value. I work in a research lab. We've been conducting research for more than 20 years. We ran 20,000 plus path experiments. And one of the early revelations that shocked us was the dramatic difference between actual value and perceived value. So often the marketer or the entrepreneur struggles because they don't know how to best communicate value in such a way as to maximize its perception. Now, this illustration works in reverse order. I could put on this whiteboard an item worth $120,000 and yet find that some people would value it at less than $1. The negative implications are actually more important than the positive implications, because if you connect with them, you'll realize there's something that will influence how we think and how we drive value in our own marketing communications. Thank you for joining us. I'm seeing familiar faces, and it's great to see Elad back, and all over this monitor in front of me, I'm seeing those of you that join us regularly. Stephen, good to see you. And I think I see Jesse from Bridge Pub here. Let me take this lesson and unpack it further and simply say this. There are three critical pieces that we can understand in a new way today that will help us communicate perceived value and help us drive up the responses to our offers. To do that, I'm going to highlight some critical pieces in this story and draw from that three principles you've heard before, but then we're going to look at them in my third point in a completely unique way. While we're doing that, you may want to submit for live optimization some related pages, and we'll explain that in just a moment. So then, as I look at this, I want to point out that the people who purchased this were not fools. They had previously, and I'm reading this right here, the Bancroft family sold their sales in the Dow Jones and Company, publishes the Wall Street Journal, to Rupert Murdoch's News Corp for over $1.2 billion. So these shrewd business people were not fools in the sense that they were highly intelligent and successful, and yet they saw the value that others might miss. Indeed, I think they could probably sell this piece of art for a profit. And I say that because if you read the stir it caused in the art world, it is shocking. Now, to do that, let's just sort of draw three critical principles out of this story. First of all, had there been this banana and this roll of tape at a Sam's or Walmart or giant store where you could actually purchase both food and things like this, you wouldn't see anywhere near this value. The first driver of this unique value is scarcity. And I want to say that scarcity was created within context. It is the context, i.e., the art museum, that working in conjunction with scarcity produce this perceived value. We're not going to talk about that yet. I'm going to break each of these down and their psychological elements as we proceed. But let me take another quote. Another driver pushed this. And in fact, we can see the power of that when we think about story. It says here in the article that seeing the stir this piece of art created globally, the Bancroft family decided to purchase it. Now, around this whole piece is the story of an artist coming out of retirement and his attempt at producing a type of effect and understanding about the impact of art, the response of the world. All of that is part of an unfolding story that attracted the Bancroft family to this opportunity. So the second piece we can see is story. And back to the art museum. The art museum is a key component in the story. And I'm going to just try to step over here where I can draw more, and let's keep going. But there's a third piece. And if you look carefully, one of the most shocking quotes in a separate article is simply this. I'll read it word for word. Comedian was withdrawn from view at art, I guess it's about sale on Sunday because of the crowds and the hullabaloo. In fact, they were afraid of damage. So many people showed up and stormed the place because of their excitement about seeing this work of art. So now we have something else working. Influence. Now, every one of you who are experienced in marketing have heard about the power of scarcity and the power of story and the power of influence, social proof, etc. But today, it's not enough to recognize those principles. We need to understand a new way to think about them that could explain what happened here, and it can explain for you and I how to get new results to our offers. Once again, I'm struggling with my voice because of all the speaking. Please bear with me, but I want to keep going. So then, what can we learn? Well, there's three things. The first of all is this. We need to recognize the three psychological drivers at work in the story. And here they are: scarcity, story, and influence. The second point is we need to appreciate the difference between value and perceived value. Now, I could show you many examples from our case study library, but all I want you to see right now is it's pretty clear right here. 77 cents, $120,000. There is a huge difference. Marketer, this gives you a unique opportunity to leverage something that we call PVD. I will tell you that my first 2 points will take just a handful of minutes, but my third point will take the rest of this time for us to understand. So let's just get to the second, and let's talk for a moment about PVD. In fact, to do that, I'm going to take the P and V representing perceived value and write a D on this side. And now we have a new concept: perceived value differential. Differential is the difference. In this case, it's actually a math equation. If you were to deduct the 77 cents from the $120,000, you would start to see that primary difference. Cliff, go full on the whiteboard if you would for a moment. And let's just unpack that for just a second. So, here we are, or you can go straight to the other pieces. The bottom line is that this differential working in the inverse is the way for you as a marketer to craft your incentives and to add overall value to your marketing equation. There's a cognitive calculus that takes place every time someone makes a purchase. What they're doing is they are subtracting their perceived cost, and I don't mean price. It could be energy, it can be risk, it can be all of those things which are negative factors, from the perceived value. And in those cases where the difference is a negative integer, i.e. it costs more than it's worth, people don't buy. Where we get stuck is we may say to ourselves, well, we know that it's worth more than this. It doesn't matter what you know. It only matters what they perceived. And in some cases, you see this unique phenomenon. It's almost magical, where perceived value becomes actual value. Now, you might argue, there's no way this banana and that piece of duct tape is worth $120,000. I would have to agree, except that if you want to follow the simple rules that take place even when you appraise a piece of real estate. I had an appraiser here tomorrow to appraise the new studio that we're just setting up. He will use market comps. Comps are examples of purchases similar to a purchase of this facility that will help him predict what the market would pay. An appraisal is supposed to determine what the market will pay. In this case, they are, I heard, standing up more examples of this exhibit in order to sell them to the art world. We've now established that while the original value may have been 77 cents or less, there is a group of buyers who will pay more than $100,000 for this piece of duct tape and a banana. By the way, they have to replace the banana every 2 days. And if you think about that, I would ask, is that really valuable if they're replacing the banana every 2 days? What are they really getting? It doesn't matter what these components are worth in dollars and cents. It matters what somebody else is willing to ascribe or pay for. And by the way, this is another reason why focus groups are not the way to go. You have to measure behavior. Had an artist done a focus group before he done this, can you imagine? Have you been in these focus groups in a business? Sitting around the table talking together and saying, I tell you what, if you were to be able to buy this banana and this roll of tape, and if we were to stick them on a wall in your house, would you be willing to pay $100,000 plus for that? Can you imagine the response they'd be getting from focus groups? I wager to say it wouldn't be very high. And yet the artist saw through all of that and produced this. Now, I'm not sure where I stand on all of that, but I understand the psychology is what's important for us today. And this brings me to my third point. David Carrier says, I'm looking on the chat, I think the art world deserves what they're getting. Boy, I understand that. It happens all over the country. It happens in politics. It happens everywhere. But I'll go to this third point, and that is this. We need to practice radical internalization, moving from the external to the internal. See, the problem with this number, in fact, let me change pens here. The problem with this number is that it's an external number, and this is an internal number. Now, it becomes external when they shell that money out, but first there was a different set of elements occurring in the mind that produced this. So what can we learn? Because what I've shown is a bit of an aha for me and for some, but it doesn't cash it in so that you can actually make a difference in your copywriting. So let's unpack them. I'm going to start by the concept of scarcity. And scarcity on the surface is an external problem. But in fact, its power is not drawn from the external, but from the internal perception. Let me share more with you on that. So I'll take you to a piece of work done by one of my employees. When we talked about this particular presentation, and I shared this story with a senior leader who is not only a team leader, but a partner in our organization, he said, I think I'm prepared to do some art myself. And in a matter of seconds, he produced a brilliant piece of art. You can see it here. It's Matt Klein. Some of you probably worked with Matt. Matt oversees our entire service organization. And Matt then looked at a desk next to him, saw a tinfoil wrapper, saw a cord from a computer, put it underneath it, and offered to sell it to anyone in the room for $75,000. He wanted to call it the artistic abstraction of the illusory power of consumerism. And we could argue all about the value of that right now, but the reality is nobody in that room was willing to pay for it. So Matt's career as an artist was short-lived, but he had the right idea. Scarcity is a driver of this success, and it has to be understood as an internal state. We can take these three components, drill down on scarcity, and see what are the most common forms of scarcity used on our websites. Here it is, while supplies last. Now I want to point out for you that particular move rarely works. And the reason it rarely works is because what we're doing is ignoring the internal. What do you think is the psychological condition that connects with scarcity and that drives someone to make that purchase, to give you that macro yes? Any ideas? What are people thinking inside when they truly believe there is a scarcity issue for something that they want to obtain? Audience, use your chat feature to tell me what it might be. Adrian says, it's good to see Adrian, joining us, I think, from London. Fear of missing out. Indeed. In fact, my notes make it precisely that way. I don't want to miss out. Remember something. Scarcity doesn't come because you tell me there aren't very many of these. Scarcity comes because I believe something, and thus I fear something. Without the concept of belief, that can be conjoined with the concept of trust. Without that, and the sense of I might not be able to get this if I don't move now, and I don't want to miss out, it's only when we achieve that second condition that scarcity becomes a driver of behavior. Now, I want you to begin thinking with me today about all of these concepts through the lens of this internal operant so that you can start to get your copy right. Marketers, I want to ask you a question. What do you think is wrong with that concept while supplies last? What is what is failing to occur in the mind of a prospective customer? If you could share with me your thoughts, I'll share them with our audience. Top Gun, I don't know who the name of the person is, but it says fear of loss is more powerful than desire for gain. It truly is. Adrian accurately states, there's no trust in this. The problem with that sentence is, number one, it's used over and over again when there isn't genuine scarcity, and so people don't believe it. The second problem is it's vague. How many supplies are there? And why? What is the driver? Why is it that you can't do this? Something is wrong in the approach, but when you get the scarcity approach right, it's transformative. I'm going to show you a semi-successful example, and this is from HubSpot. This is a case study from the Marketing Sherpa Case Study Library. By the way, by the end of the day, I'll have a long list of resources that you can draw from. We're going to put those into the YouTube description so you can share or study various links with accompanying resources that will unpack much more of what I'm saying today. And this is one of those resources. There's a whole article, a case study written on this. What you're going to see is the difference between the control and the treatment. It's highlighted in a little piece that's easy to miss unless you look down. Right at the top, though, it says available for 2 days only. Now, this worked and it didn't work. If that sounds paradoxical, let me explain. We know it drove a 6% increase. That's a gain. But why did it drive a 20% increase or more? What do you think was wrong? Audience, share with me. What do you think was wrong with this particular approach? And while you're doing that, let me suggest this. If you have examples of scarcity that you're using in your own marketing materials, submit them right now. We will give you a link for that. And we may study that and talk about how to refine the message to get the highest impact. So I'm reading what you've said. No trust because no reason given. That's right. Is it really plausible that this digital report is only going to be available for 2 days? And how many of us have seen websites that claim such things, but then we come back and it's the same sort of message 3 days later? Unfortunately, marketers, our job is made more difficult because businesses regularly lie to their prospects. And this violates the first component of the trust trial, and it hurts us desperately. We can talk about that in something else that's going to come up. I'm going to share with you a link that's very, very interesting. But I just want to move on for a second and point out what happens when we do this in the wrong way. This is a study from an academic journal article. I think it was at Princeton. And if you look in the breadcrumbs at the top, it says dark patterns at scale. Findings from a crawl of 11,000 shopping websites. This group of scholars were trying to understand what they call dark patterns. That is, negative manipulation used by marketers to achieve an objective in their, business context. And we see this every day. Look at what I have highlighted in yellow. They analyzed 53,000 product pages, 11,000 shopping websites, and discovered over 1,800 what they call dark pattern instances. These are the situations where you've seen long copy and they use a JavaScript to change the date and tell you that you have to respond by a certain point. And then that date updates itself regularly. This is what happens when we make a claim. Years ago, I saw a company, we actually purchased it. Prior to the purchase, they offered a massive sale of a special report, a very expensive special report. Much more than a book, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And they were selling out their old inventory. And after we took possession of the business, because we wanted to use it in our research, they suggested that we continue to do this because they had made a significant amount of money there. And I found out that they were going back and printing that item, which was out of inventory. Well, I put a halt to it, not to sound noble, but because you don't start a new relationship by lying to your prospects. So all over the internet, we see this sort of dark use of scarcity, frankly, of all three of these components. And they are making it harder for you and I who want to do something right for our consumers or our customers. And they make it harder for us to communicate in a way that's trusted. So we have to learn how to talk about scarcity in a way that is. Let me give an example that we used in our own work, because I think it will help you see the pattern. I'll come back to this, but you'll notice 1,000 attendees. That was the limit for this particular web clinic. The minute we used that particular approach, we saw a 15% increase. And it was limited to 1,000. So this is a case where scarcity was genuine. We really couldn't do the job well with more than 1,000 because of the nature of the technology. But by telling people that, we saw a spike in conversion. So let's understand something together before we move to the next point. And I need you to understand it because I'm going to ask you to help me teach the next point. You'll see why in just a moment. Let's understand that you can't think of scarcity as something external, but you have to understand what that message is achieving in the mind. And you won't achieve a legitimate fear of missing out. And there's nothing wrong with that. We've all had summits where there's a limited amount of tickets that can be sold, or items that are hard to reproduce. I recently went into back order on my book in our 7th printing because we couldn't keep up with demand. It wasn't high demand because we don't print that many, but it was real and significant, and there was a multi-week delay. So those are the uses of scarcity in such a way as to produce in someone a genuine stimulus to behave. But let's go to the next piece, because now I need your help. I want to talk about the second component, which is influence. I'm going to change the order. The power of influence. And as you think about that with me, I want you to ask a question. When I use influence, i.e. social proofs, celebrities and authorities, what is the internal condition we're trying to produce in the mind? What is the internal operant? And I'd like you to help me by putting in here. Adrian says, your copy did not explain why 1,000. You're right. It can be done that way, and the why is a key factor. But let's keep going. Trust. No, I'm looking for a statement that begins with I. I want you to think about what I need to conclude internally that will use the power of influence. Tribal belonging, says Dylan. Dylan, if you don't mind me using your inputs and your thoughts here for just a second, what you've said is accurate, but it has to be reframed in the first person as an I, or you don't know how to approximate it and target it in your messaging. You've got to move in this empathetic step from who you are to who they are. You've got to get out of your shoes and into theirs and understand what they are thinking in the form of a conclusion. I must believe the influencer, says Sarvi. I want to believe you're part of my tribe. Now you're getting there, Dylan. All of us trying to achieve this understanding of scarcity, influence, and story need to think about what it is we're trying to stimulate and think about it through the first person, or it's very, very difficult to actually make the connection. Stephen's got a very good one here. I want to be part of that exclusive group. That's your American Express Platinum. To some extent, the gold card. And there are levels beyond that. We've worked with American Express on their specialist memberships, and I found that to be true. As you're thinking about that with me, I want to show you an example of someone who did it well. Now, we know that eventually they had business issues, but they had a remarkable idea that worked very well for a while. And here you can see it with Groupon. Look, there's 1 day left. And then, look, 21 bought. And the way this works is there has to be enough purchases before the discount will take place. So they're reminding you that if you don't help them reach the goal, no one can get the discount. And so they're combining multiple factors here to help produce and influence your decision. Here's another example. High Smile features Kylie Jenner and Conor McGregor. He's the fighter from the UFC. And when they use them, they see their baseline of 1,000 increased 5 to 10-fold. Again, this is something happening by using an authority influence play. All right, so with that in mind, let me take it to these key components, because I don't think we've quite yet grasped, and I think if I can give you 3 of these internal conclusions, you can start to think about instances that would apply in your own messaging. I'm really struggling with my voice. I hope you're hearing me well. Please forgive me. I could not delay today since we had the holidays and moved the studio, and I didn't want to disappoint you. So I'm doing my best. Give me a little grace if you could. I'm getting worse as I go. Scarcity, story, influence. Now, take a look at how we drive an internal conclusion around story. There you are. In fact, I'll go ahead and then I'll go back. This is the one I want you to see. Here's one. I want to be like others. Here's another. If others like it, I will. Here's another. If most or many people like it, or our third is repetitive, if it's back to this third piece, and that is, I want to be like that person. Now, all 3 of those are driving value. In fact, there's 2, and there's a component, there's a third piece. The third piece on here is a version error. But as you put those together, can you see the gist of this? Can anyone else think of an influence conclusion that we're after internally to produce that sort of remarkable scarcity? You see, even with the sale of the banana, they saw crowds responding, and so they responded. And then when they paid that money, they stimulated more crowds responding, and so it became a bit of a virtuous circle in economics. What can we go after inside that will really help them respond to what we're doing? Well, influence is about these types of conclusions. How does this work when we apply it to story? I'll show you an example. You're looking at a newsletter. It looks campy, old, like it was put on old copy machines. But this group charges an enormous price for a carton of eggs. And every time you experience that purchase, they put this interesting, very carefully engineered farm news. It looks like old school Farmer's Digest type work, Farmer's Almanac, inside the carton of eggs. And it continues to use story to help you appreciate the unique value that would make you pay 5 times what you might pay for a normal carton of eggs. Story is very, very powerful. Here's another piece. Our staff internally drafted a letter, and we redrafted it using the power of story. This is for a summit. And what did we see? Well, we far exceeded our projections selling out the event. Everything we said was accurate. On the other hand, I've seen events that tell you there's an early bird discount, and it is by such and such date, and they keep moving it over and over again. Now, it's okay to extend it now and then, but when you do it all the time, you train people to wait for the discount, and you also make yourself and your perception in the mind of your customer to be less trustworthy. You follow the logic there? All right, let's look at another way story can be used right now on your website. This is a timeline. We use this timeline to connect the story of MECLABS. It's the story of MECLABS that helps communicate its unique value proposition. We are a research institute. We're not a consultancy. We do sometimes help people as part of our research, and you can find out more about that. But ultimately, what you're seeing is us using a timeline in conjunction with a narrative to tell a story. Many of us are failing in our about pages to have the highest impact on behavior and to communicate the essence of our value proposition because we neglect to tell a story. I see paragraphs of marketing speak, but rarely do I see a well-told story that impacts conclusions in the mind. So when you put these items together, when you put scarcity and story and influence, and often you can combine them, you achieve this unique set of conclusions in the mind. Now, I'm gonna erase something. Austin, can you get that for me? I've dropped my clicker, and I want to share with you where this becomes urgent. In fact, I'll just take my priceless banana down. While supplies last, we're selling this banana today, and we're going to give you a big bargain. We're only going to sell it for $60,000. Just write in and we'll give it to you. In the meantime, you've often heard me teach that the essence of the value proposition answers a critical question. And that question is, if I am the ideal customer, why should I purchase from you rather than XYZ, whatever the alternate actions or behaviors are? And we've also said that there are 4 conclusions you must achieve in the mind. The first one is, I want this. And the second one is, I can't get this anywhere else. Now, that I can't get this anywhere else, that whole piece, I'm just going to sort of abbreviate, that whole piece is dependent on them concluding that there's some unique dimension of value that you deliver that they can't get anywhere else. And if they could, why should they buy from you? You're just surviving on pockets of ignorance. But if you have something unique, even a single dimension that's meaningful and significant to them of exclusivity, you help them conclude, I can't get this anywhere else. What am I telling you? The number one driver of your value proposition is going to be the story you tell that produces a conclusion in the mind that you are the only place they can get that exact, what we call RCE, resulting customer experience. I didn't coin the phrase resulting customer experience. Michael Lanning did. He's the man who actually coined the phrase value proposition. And my point for you is these 3 components can come together not to sell a banana to the art world, but to help you sell more of the most important and valuable products that you can put in front of the prospect or customer that you're trying to reach. So, as I think about that with you, I'd like to ask you another question. How have you, think about this on your user, who's using scarcity or influence or story right now? Use your chat feature to share with me how you're doing that or where you're doing that so we can figure out together how others can benefit from the same. I'm watching. Minus and plus, Elad says. Go ahead and use your chat feature to tell us that, and then let me ask you a question. Eli Sheffer says oil. Yeah. Oil is an example of that, and it can be legitimate or it can be fake. Do you know the diamond cartel in South Africa controls the supply of diamonds because if there are too many diamonds on the market, it impacts overall price. It's the same principle over and over again, but we have to learn to think of it through a different lens, not through the external, but through the internal. Now, I think if you will, here's an example and an answer, so let me interrupt myself. I offer a live-only webinar and explain that you need to listen to the whole talk to understand the powerful materials that accompany it. So this is one of our own audience members sharing how they do it. Others may do the same, but I'll tell you what I think I'm going to do. I want to, first of all, thank you for bearing with me and being here today. Secondly, I want to thank you for giving me grace. And thirdly, I want to probably bring this to a conclusion now so that I can recover my voice and get ready for next week. Here's another example, though. I'm filling in a gap in foreign language learning that nobody else can do. Yakov says, I want to be with the successful ones. And on it goes. My point for all of you today is if we think through these concepts, not from the outside, but from the inside, we can achieve a different set of results, more significant conversion, because of the way we are helping people perceive value. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for putting up with me, and I'll be back next week with more.